Are you good to go, Helen?
Okay, so thank you for having me to give this talk about business and biodiversity. I'm Helen, I'm from Make It Wild. We are a small, originally family organisation based in North Yorkshire, and our mission is to support nature and biodiversity. So I'm going to talk about why biodiversity matters to you, or why it should, and what you can do in your business and personally to help with biodiversity. So first of all, what is biodiversity? I'm not going to ask you to answer because it's a bit awkward in video format, but it's a word that we are hearing a lot in the news and increasingly, and there's a very good reason for that, which I will explain. But biodiversity, it's simply a word made from biology and diversity. So it means a diversity of biology. So it means lots of different species. We also have a word bioabundance, and that means lots of one species, but biodiversity is what we're talking about today, and that means lots of different species. So just to expand on that a little bit, it means biological diversity, but it really means the wide variety of all the living creatures in the natural world. So that's animals, plants, fungi, and not forgetting microorganisms, which are really important, which I'll explain in a moment. But biodiversity is also, moving beyond its definition, biodiversity is absolutely essential for all the processes that support life on Earth. And of course, that includes us humans, because we are, after all, animals. We've just chosen to live as we do, wearing clothes, driving around in metal boxes, living in brick buildings and looking at each other on screens. But we are still fundamentally animals, and therefore we are part of life on Earth and part of biodiversity, or you'd be forgiven for not realizing that the way we are interacting with our world currently. And biodiversity is also a requirement for healthy ecosystems. So that really brings us to our next question to consider as a definition before we get into the meat of the topic. What is an ecosystem? So ecosystems are the way we talk about how creatures interact within the natural world. So when I was at school, it was food chains. I think it's then moved on to food webs, but now quite properly, even in school, it's talked about ecosystems. And an ecosystem is the interactions, the network of all of the creatures. So as I mentioned, the microorganisms are really important in this. So if we look, for example, at this one, this is looking at soil and earthworms and the creatures within soil. So at the bottom of every ecosystem, well, we call it the bottom, thinking of that food chain model, but the smallest creatures, the producers and the plants. So they take energy from the sun and thereby feed and support all of the bigger creatures as you go sort of up in size and up in complexity within the ecosystem. So they're just two reminders. So biodiversity means the diversity of all of the living creatures, and the ecosystem is a complex network in which they all interact. It's important to remember that in that ecosystem, there are many interactions, and you can see all those arrows going all over the place. It isn't just a big thing eating a medium thing, eating a smaller thing. Everything has a complex interaction, and that's really why we speak of biodiversity as being so important. We need all of those elements. It's not really that long since scientists realized if you cause one thing to become extinct, something else will grow to fill its space, or the thing it used to predate will have a ballooning in its population. So they're all intimately and intricately linked in an ecosystem. And this is why we're here, really. This is a really stark and devastating statistic from the World Wildlife Fund. This is their most recent results from their Living Planet report last year. And their research over 5,500 vertebrate species has shown that there's been a decline of 73% since 1970. So that's, in normal language, very nearly 3/4 of all creatures have been lost from our Earth since 1970. So that's really devastating. So that's 3/4 of birds, butterflies, insects, big animals, medium-sized animals. 3/4 have been lost, and that's really a stark reminder of why we all need to think about biodiversity, especially when I come on to explain how important that is to us as business people. The reasons for that loss in biodiversity are largely down to humans. We seem to have largely forgotten that we're a crucial part of biodiversity, a crucial part of the ecosystem. And really, we have damaged our ecosystem in a devastating fashion, but all is not lost. There's ways we can help, which I'll come on to. But we've overhunted, overfished, we've degraded habitat, we've destroyed habitat. Climate change is in there, and climate change is very intricately linked to biodiversity, as I'll expand on. So we have been responsible for a lot of this damage, but I think we can also think of lots of imaginative ways to support biodiversity, which I'm going to move on to. So what we're going to cover is the background, why we should think about biodiversity. I'll then talk about practical steps. What can we actually do to help? What are the actual tangible actions we can take? And the benefits to our business. How will doing all these things help our business? And then I'll talk through some case studies towards the end. So why should we consider biodiversity? Well, as I've hinted at, it's absolutely crucial in a number of ways. It's crucial for long-term sustainability. And that word, that's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Sustainability. And it really means the ability to keep going with our business. If we, destroy all of the raw materials and all of the systems that support our businesses, we haven't got a long-term hope of a business. It's crucial too for economic stability, which I will explain a bit more. And it's really, in 2025, it's crucial for your brand reputation. So, that these are all of the reasons that we can't ignore what's happening in the world around us. So why does biodiversity matter for business? It's essential for a stable environment. So whatever business we're running, there will no doubt be resources that we use. So even if we're sort of at desk based, we need our laptop, we need our computers, we need a desk, we need materials. If we're in manufacturing, of course, we have supply chains, we need our raw materials, we need people to be able to travel and make whatever it is we're making. So we need the environment in which these things are all going on to be stable and therefore predictable and manageable. And of course, biodiversity is increasingly recognised and considered in our ESG, so our environmental, social and governance of our business, and of course our corporate responsibility. And I'll explain the sorts of people who might be looking at that. Just to highlight as well the financial impacts of biodiversity loss. your supply chains will be disrupted if we don't support biodiversity. So there are lots of stories, particularly in the fishing industry, about overfishing having completely emptied the seas of herring, for example, is a famous one in Scandinavia. The herring was like a gold rush. Towns grew up based on the herring, and it was almost as if they thought the herring was an infinite resource. But of course, eventually they overfished, the herring died out, and the fishing industry died, and towns with it, and people's income. That's a fairly drastic example, but in agriculture and forestry, these things are beginning to impact on people's ability to do their business and to make a living. I'll talk a little bit more about what is called, rather unfortunately, I think, ecosystem services, but we need our ecosystem to provide a lot of what we need to live and run our businesses. But there are increased costs of running your business and the costs of raw materials if the ecosystems are allowed to degrade. And finally, regulatory pressure. Governments are on a program of introducing standards for biodiversity and sustainability, and this, I hope, is going to happen more and more. They've already started looking at carbon offsetting for big businesses, but I think this will only increase as we all become more aware of what's happening in the world around us. So, ecosystem services. I don't really like that expression very much. It's as if we humans are here and the entirety of nature is just to provide services to us, which I fundamentally don't agree with. I think, as I said, we're animals and we're part of the ecosystem, really. However, it does give us a way of talking about these things. So the way that policymakers talk about ecosystem services, there are 4 categories of service. So the first one is provisioning services, and I've talked a little bit about that. So that's the ability of the natural world and of the biodiverse world to provide us with the raw materials that we need, and of course fundamental things like food and water. Timber is a very kind of obvious one. We can see forests growing and then they produce timber, so that's the provision of a raw material or of a substance that we need. The next category is regulating services. So ecosystems have the ability to self-regulate if they are well, largely left alone without too much interference. And at Make It Wild, we practice rewilding. That's one of the things that we do to support nature. And our intention in rewilding is to allow the ecosystem to reach a quality and a diversity that it can self-regulate. So there are many other examples of ecosystems, functioning biodiverse ecosystems, regulating things that we need to be regulated. So the obvious one is climate regulation. So the ecosystem plays actually quite a big part in not only the big climate change that we're all aware of, but also in local climate. So trees and woodlands have their own water cycle, for example. So they, in a sense, control local weather and climate conditions through that. The ecosystem is also responsible for water purification. So that's a picture of a reservoir that I've put there. And we rely on natural systems to purify the water that we need to drink, and for all those other manufacturing processes and so on. And interestingly, disease control is considered a regulating. So, oh, sorry, I can hear someone else chatting there. So disease control is the final in the regulating services. So moving on to the other types of ecosystem services. So continuing what nature does for us. So there's supporting services is the next category, and that's the fundamental processes of nature. So I've talked about ecosystems and how that's that network, that cycle, and of course nutrients cycle around a working, functional, biodiverse ecosystem. So when a creature dies, falls to the ground, and a whole wave of creatures will come and take away. If it's a rabbit that's died, you know that you'll get flies and maggots and beetles, and then you'll have the carrion eaters, crows, and things like that. But the nutrients and the molecules within that rabbit don't just disappear. They re-enter the cycle, and you know that their molecules will come to live in a crow or a beetle or whatever it might be. So you know that's absolutely a profoundly important thing. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have all the creatures which clear up the ecosystem. So, you know, if you think of your compost heap at home, I hope you've all got compost heaps. You see this in action. So you put your vegetable peelings on, and in a couple of years you've got fabulous soil. All the worms have arrived, they've done their job, and they've done their nutrient cycling. Well, that brings us very nicely on to soil formation. So that's a process that's going on in nature that we absolutely need. It supports, you know, our gardens, but more importantly, it supports agriculture. We wouldn't really have soil without a healthy biodiverse ecosystem. And we mustn't forget here pollination. Pollinators get talked about a lot, and it's a bit rotten, really. It's a bit, again, of a human-centric view. The insects that pollinate flowers for us to produce our fruit and our food, they're actually just visiting the flowers to eat for themselves, and they happen to get the pollen dusting on their furry bodies or on their legs, and then when they go to the next flower they pollinate it. But they're not doing that as a service to us. They're doing that because that's how they live and that's their role in the ecosystem. But nonetheless, we can look upon that from our human-centered view of things, that this is a service that nature provides to us. And if we lose our pollinators, we will lose in a huge part of what nature provides in the way of food. And finally, cultural services. And there's no doubt really that nature provides a huge resource to us in terms of our rest and recreation, and our sport, running, walking, and aesthetic appreciation. So if we, I'm going to talk a little bit more actually about the benefits of time in nature, and it does go a little bit beyond aesthetic appreciation. But if you think of what's the most beautiful thing you've seen in the past week, chances are it will be a natural phenomenon, a sunset, sunrise, beautiful tree, beautiful flower, that kind of thing. So that again is considered an ecosystem service, but it's a fundamental part, and it's our home really in nature. So moving on a bit to the expectations, and so there are lots of different groups of people that have expectations of you as a business owner or as somebody working in a business. So consumers are increasingly favouring sustainable businesses, and sustainability doesn't just mean looking after your carbon footprint. It's part of it, but there's a much bigger view on sustainability, as I've said, where we're looking at true fundamental ability to sustain what we're doing in the long term. And consumers are aware of that increasingly. People don't want, or intelligent, thoughtful people who are aware of all this don't want a business that's just extracting from the earth and destroying nature in the process. And particularly biodiversity conscious brands do attract a loyal following, and are talked about, and become near enough household names. I'm going to give you a little example in a moment. And investors, if you're looking for investment, this is one of the things that will be on the checklist when your potential investors do their due diligence about your business. They will be looking at sustainability, about your support for biodiversity. And investors want to support nature, that they understand all of this, mostly probably from the economics and the money point of view. But there's a saying, you can't make money from a dead planet. In fact, there's a good book by that title. And though, if we're thinking of the future, the investors will be looking to support businesses who in turn support nature. And many of them will have an ESG scoring system, which includes biodiversity. So there's two groups of people there who will be expecting you to have something in your policies about supporting biodiversity. And this is my example here. Those the deodorant and body wash there in that picture are from a company I hope you've heard of called Wild, famous for their biodiversity supporting deodorants particularly, and they have just been bought by Unilever for 230 million. So there's a lived illustration of what I'm saying. So further groups of people with expectations of businesses. So this is from Gallup's, slightly out of date now, 2023, but I think it will only have increased. 71% of job seekers will be looking at your sustainability and environmental practices before even applying for your jobs. And I'll mention a bit later about how looking at your business through biodiversity also supports retention. And locally to Yorkshire, graduate recruitment for a large firm of accountants. 6 years ago, only 1 in 20 applicants were interested in ESG, but by last year that had increased to 19 out of 20. So that's a huge increase in awareness in this kind of thing by applicants. So of course you want to attract the best talent. You don't want to be putting people off by not having this on your agenda. So biodiversity and climate resilience, as I said, these two are really closely linked. So we're seeing a lot more extreme weather events. We could be in the middle of one now with it being 20 something degrees, and we're still in April. But we've seen in the news flooding, droughts, gale force winds, heat waves, and all of these impact on our supply chains. Naturally, if your delivery driver's driving for a flood, they're not going to get there. The power cuts in Spain were allegedly caused by strange atmospheric conditions. I think the jury's out on that, what the truth will be, but that's what it was said to be. And of course, all of these things, all of these upsets to the weather and to climate increase your costs ultimately, because delivery firms will have to take out more insurance, have to have more vans if the vans get stuck in the wrong place. If there's a high wind and a tree falls down on your factory, you've got increased costs. So there's a very real cost to this. But biodiversity mitigates a lot of these impacts. So by concreting over so much of our planet, it means that the water, for example, can't be soaked into the soil and go through its normal natural water cycle, but it's sitting there on the surface and it has to go somewhere. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many floods. It's also raining erratically, a lot of rain at one time rather than spread out over several months. But biodiversity can mitigate a lot of these impacts too. As I said, trees and woodland bring about their own microclimate and help to stabilize rain. So the climate situation and biodiversity are really closely linked. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the why section. So are there any questions before we move on to the things that you can do? John, you're going to have to speak up if there's anything.
No, you're all good.
Or we can just move on.
Keep
Okay,
going.
so we'll move on to what can we do. So we'll look first at your office space if you have one, but this a lot of these can equally apply to your homes if you're hybrid working, or to your home anyway if you really want to help. So-called green infrastructure. So there's quite a lot of companies now fitting green roofs and living walls, and these help against what I was talking about, this concreting over of the land, which doesn't allow water to permeate. You can consider wildlife friendly landscaping. I'll talk a little bit about that, what that might include. And really importantly is to reduce pesticide and chemical use. Quite obviously, if we think about an ecosystem and that food web, if you're using pesticides, you're killing off all those little creatures which support the rest of the ecosystem, and then the predators that eat those, or the next creatures that eat those, will in turn be poisoned. We still like the cuddly creatures. We like birds, hedgehogs, and we don't like to think of them being killed. But really, we should start thinking about the nematodes and the invertebrates, because, as I said, if we kill all of them off, we're really in trouble. So that's, would be my number one thing. If you're still using slug pellets or any type of spray in your gardens or in your office outside spaces, that would be a number one step to action to take, would be to stop using that kind of thing and try and support every size of creature. Here's an easy one that will save you money. Reduce light, outside lighting at night. Many of our nocturnal species are really struggling. So moths, lots of species of moth are in decline and are struggling. And bats, we all love to think about bats. They're an absolute iconic British creature of summer evenings, but they're nocturnal, and having lights on at night disrupts their feeding and disrupts their life. And it will also save you money. Lots of these things actually can save you money. I haven't stressed that particularly in terms of the small things, but maybe motion sense lights if you need lighting for security, but that's an easy win. There's two easy wins there, really. So looking at your office space, again, this goes a bit more about water management. So gardens with permeable surfaces, so that water runs into the soil, it doesn't run off. And actually pollution, if water can go through the soil where it falls, then it gets cleansed by the soil, rather than gathering all of the litter and all of the oil from your car park and going off into the rivers, carrying all that pollution. Indoor plants are really important. I'm going to mention them a little bit later, but not only are they good to look at, nice to have, remind us about nature, connect us to nature, they actually improve air quality. So that's an easy win as well, whether you're in an office or whether you're working at home. Surprising benefits from having house plants around. And again, if you are lucky enough to have an outside space for your office, or again in your garden at home, whether this is a garden, a yard, a yarden, a new word for me recently, or a balcony, or any outside space, even a window box, actually, you can help. And it's important to choose native plants. And native plants are important because they have evolved along with the creatures that live on them. So a magnolia tree might be very beautiful, but it's intended to be habitat for an exotic kind of ant that we don't even have. I think it's an ant, it might be a beetle. We don't have it in the UK. So we need to think about native plants that our own wildlife has grown up with. A bird feeder is a really easy win to support birds. Bee and bug hotels don't have to be anything fancy, just a pile of old logs and leaves. If you're really interested, on our YouTube channel, we were asked to, in the lockdown, to make a little film about making a bug hotel. So that's there. But water, again, water is really important to wildlife, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the introduction of some kind of water feature, a tiny pond in a sink, has massive benefits for wildlife. Many invertebrates, so the insects, the pollinators, as we call them, have an aquatic stage to their life cycle. So it's really important that they have water to live in at that stage. 1 million farm ponds have been lost in the last decade, 1 million. And they're just all got filled in, so we can drive bigger tractors round, which is quite devastating for the populations of all kinds of creatures that rely on them. So a water feature is a really, again, it's an easy win and it's important. I want to talk about the hedgehog here. I've already mentioned them. And they're one of the main animals that you can protect by stopping using pesticides in your gardens. So a hedgehog, this is a picture of our ancient woodland where I am today at Summerbridge near Harrogate. And actually the bluebells are slightly more advanced than in that photo. It's absolutely gorgeous here today. So a hedgehog would be very happy living here. There's dead leaves, there's twigs, there's places to hide, there's a fallen tree that it could live among. There's nice long grass that it can hide. The hedgehog can crawl around, finding beetles and creatures to eat. It can wander for miles without encountering anything that's going to hurt it. There's no roads, there's no fences. So it's sort of hedgehog paradise, really. And this is bits from lots of my other talks about encouraging nature into your garden, but really nature's messy. Young trees, old trees, dead trees, upright trees, fallen trees, and that's what most of our wildlife really enjoys, and particularly the hedgehog, which is a bit of an icon in when you're thinking about nature in your garden. Unfortunately, modern gardens sometimes look a bit more like that. That's fake grass, and I believe some of the plants are also fake. Just imagine a poor hedgehog. If it found its way into there, it couldn't find its way out. And hedgehogs need to wander a mile each night looking for food, looking for a mate. So please don't aspire to have a garden like that. It's just hedgehog hell, really, if the ancient woodland was hedgehog paradise. So that's a bit of a diversion into a hedgehog, which is a kind of iconic species. If you help hedgehogs in your garden, you're helping lots of other things too. So if you have a garden that's anything like that with fences around it, just make a little hole in the bottom of one of the fence panels so that the hedgehog can go wandering if it happens to find itself in your garden. So just to illustrate some of these things, a tiny little case study here, a company called Waterstones that we work with based in Durham, a digital company. They said to us, we'd like to help nature. We've got this scruffy little corner that's in a corner of the between the building and the car park. We can't mow it, nobody can look after it. What can we do to help nature? And really the answer was, well, nature loves a scruffy area. If it wasn't big enough for a tree, maybe you could stick a bird feeder there, maybe you could put an old sink with some water in. But really the answer is, nature loves a scruffy area. Nature doesn't like us to be too tidy. And just to show you this is a tiny pond that we made actually at the holiday cottage that we have as part of our business. And within about 2 weeks, that toad spawn had arrived. I don't know if you can see. No, I can't show it you, but running across where the overflow used to be, those dots in lines, they're toad spawn. Frog spawn comes in a big random mass, but toad spawn is in lines like that. And below and to the left, there is a mayfly emerging, and that was literally within 2 weeks. So that's just to illustrate the importance of water in your outside space. So moving on to some of the things that you can do. It's really important to bring your team along with you. I don't know how many of you have teams or work in teams, but you know that it's a huge benefit to everyone if you can bring the team along with you. So there's a whole wealth of biodiversity focused team activities that you can encourage your team to join. Whether it's tree planting days, we offer tree planting and conservation volunteering here at Make It Wild across our 11 nature reserves. But litter picking is a great thing to do. And of course, it's supporting biodiversity because litter damages the environment, damages the habitat, is poisonous to creatures if they eat them, and of course it looks a mess as well, so you'll be helping your community in your area too. But bringing the team along and getting them enthused about nature is a great thing to do. And then if you like to look at your purchasing, so this is a bit more sort of conventional business side of things. My example here is actually a company based in Hull. I've used their pictures, and they refurbish and reuse office furniture. But all of really of your office supplies and equipment, next time you're ordering anything, you know, have a look if you can get something that's refurbished, because that's the best way. Something that exists is always more sustainable than something that has to be made. And when you're looking at your suppliers, whatever it is that you need, try and examine their ethical stance. Do they have a policy about biodiversity and sustainability? And try and prioritize someone who does support biodiversity. Hopefully you've heard of the circular economy, where you know you really try not to bring in new resources, but you know things that exist are used more, and regenerative practices where you are you're supporting the planet rather than extracting from it all the time. So these are some of the things that you could look at in your supply chain. Looking now at your materials, I don't know how many of you use wood or paper packaging, but FSC certified wood is that's the Forest Stewardship Council, who support responsible forestry. So the paper or cardboard that comes with that logo on means that those forests are being replanted, and that there is an acknowledgement that woodland is important for biodiversity. You could choose packaging or materials made from recycled materials. Again, that's I'm going to talk about the waste hierarchy in a moment, but that if it's recycled materials are again the sort of one step down from having something reused or refurbished, but it's still a good way to go. And please try and use plastic-free packaging. Plastic in the food industry, it's a bit controversial because actually wrapping with plastic can reduce food waste, which again is a big problem. But for most other things, you can get away with plastic-free packaging. There's all sorts of materials on the market now. I'm going to talk about one of my case studies have managed to get plastic-free packaging across their ranges. So that's something to look at too. And reducing waste. Waste is a strange thing, really. We talk about throwing things away, but there isn't an away. As I was talking about with the nutrient recycling in nature, if something dies, it lies where it dies and it'll get eaten and all of its molecules will get recycled. We humans have this concept of throwing things away as if they'll disappear, but they don't. They're still on the planet. We've only got one planet. So waste, it's really good to reduce your waste any way you can. So it's something to read about, really, and try if you possibly can to reduce waste, because it means that you're reducing your use, you're reusing things, and you're just being more mindful about the use of the world's resources, which is, of course, better for biodiversity. So that's something to share with your teams, and there's lots of resources, online available to educate people about that if that was of interest. Composting, I alluded to. It is just one of my favorite things. I think it was a sign I'd grown up really when I got interested in composting, but I just love it. Chuck all your veg cuttings, your prunings, grass cuttings. I don't even mix it up particularly. I just fill it one summer, leave it for 2 years while I fill the other two, and then I have the most amazing free compost in 2 years' time, and it's just brilliant. It supports biodiversity because you get all those creatures moving in. It's free. It helps your veggies grow when you put it on. So that's a brilliant idea. And if you're in an office situation, try and make recycling easy. There's lots of resources explaining how communication about recycling can help people to actually do it. Make it really easy. Don't have 7 bins where people have to really concentrate hard on which goes where. Just try and make it easy, so that if there are things to be recycled, that happens and that it's easy. And as I said before, really try to cut plastic use, because that's something it's difficult to recycle, and it does tend to go off to be incinerated or used for landfill to landfill, which is not a good thing. So here, just I'll speed up a bit so that I can get my case studies in. So the waste hierarchy, you've probably all seen. It used to be just reduce, reuse, recycle, didn't it? But really, we now have to prevent the use of stuff. Try and think of some, as I say, a refurbished thing or a reused thing. Reduce our reliance on resources, reuse things if we can, recycle, recover is a new one in there to me. And then finally, which we should really try not to do, is dispose of a thing, because there isn't really anywhere to dispose of it to. And I think this is the last one in my ideas of what you can do. You can support conservation as a business. So the obvious one really that people talk about is offsetting your carbon footprint. And you could possibly think about doing that, whatever the size of your business. Support biodiversity projects too as part of your business ESG. And a local scheme gives you added benefits. You can visit it, you can help. And just to mention, my own business, Make It Wild here, we can offer all of these things. We're based in North Yorkshire, and we try really hard to connect with our community, to allow people to connect with nature, to come and see their trees. You can even help plant your trees. You can volunteer with us, and the end goal that we're trying to achieve is a functioning biodiverse ecosystem. But there are lots of other people that you can do this with. The way that we plant our trees for carbon offsetting is primarily for biodiversity, which is my sort of way in to understanding about it. We don't just plant non-native trees in rows. Our woodland plantings are wild and are intended to be the ancient woodlands of the future. So there's the things that we can do. Any questions, John? Nope.
No, we're still question free. So if that's
okay, I'll move on. So the benefits.
Oh, sorry, someone's put their hand up. 1 second.
Okay.
We've got a question from Christine.
Hi, just I don't know if you guys are aware, but it's just from the 30th of March, it became legal. From the Leeds City Council, they put out that you have to now recycle all your food waste. So we've already implemented that in with all our recycling. So general waste, food waste, mixed recycling, and paper and card all has to be separated within Leeds City Centre currently, and that's come from the 31st of March.
Yes, so, yeah. I think it's become law nationally.
Yes.
I don't know where it has to go to, and I think that will depend on your region. But
Well,
and I don't.
I know there's it's because of how many people weren't doing food waste, that there's not enough bins to go around at the moment.
Oh wow, gosh! I wonder what they're doing with it. Are they putting it through hot composting or something like that?
The thing is, they've just said they're doing it, and I hope they're not just dumping it somewhere and just what's the
Yeah,
saying?
I mean, food waste. There's things you can do with food waste that are much better than chucking it in landfill,
Yeah.
because it's not. Oh, well, I don't know that they do. I don't know that
Well,
many people do
they
use
do something
landfill, but
better than dumping
yeah,
it.
yeah. So you can hot compost it, you can heat treat it, and then feed it to animals. I think that's come back as being allowed with all BSE and stuff. That all stopped. But yeah, thank you for that. So yes, food now does have to be disposed of, in quotation marks, separately from your other materials. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the.
We've got
Another one.
question from Shabana.
Yep.
I was just going to say, I now and then go to Subway on the app, Too Good to Go, and it's like next day, for lunch. So, with businesses not having to send the food put them in the recycling bins or the compost.
Yeah.
That might be something for Leeds, to talk about with your businesses and share that.
Yes, yeah, there's quite a few apps actually. There's a few. I can't remember. There's one where you can actually even personally give away food, but lots of the shops are in schemes, aren't there? Where if you go at 3
At a
o'clock,
certain time,
yeah, like I think it's Costa in it. I used to have an app which alerted me, but because I'm vegan, the food that they were trying to give me was always ham or something, so that was very good. But
it's
yeah,
too good
I mean,
the one that I use, Helen, is too good to go.
right. Yeah, there's another one called, oh, I can't remember what it's called.
It's in
But yes,
it's Olio, Helen.
yes, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, Olio. Yeah. But there's a number, a number of them do that. And there's some excellent businesses who gather food that's approaching its or at its sell-by date, and then redistribute it or use it in catering. There's Surplus to Purpose in Leeds. There's Magic Hat in Newcastle, and that there are probably others that I don't know about. But there's quite a move actually to reduce food waste, and they're all good schemes to link with. Both eat free or cheaper food, which would otherwise get chucked away, or make sure you dispose of your own food waste properly. So yeah, thank you. That's great. So are we okay now to move on to the benefits to your business of supporting biodiversity? So, I mean, fundamentally, we're talking here about the long-term future of our planet, and it's our long-term future. We're part of nature. We can't really get away from that. So it's really, really important. It's about the most important thing you could do, really. It's profound. We get wound up in our own little worlds and our spreadsheets and our cash flow and all of that, but actually we really do have to think about what's out of the window. Well, out of my window, I'm looking out at our beautiful ancient woodland and some newly planted trees, but look around you and marvel at nature, and just this is all part of how to help nature. But of course, we have to think about the economy, and the stability of the economy is fundamentally reliant on biodiversity, as I've explained. The stability of supply chains. Your delivery driver can't drive through a flood, can't bring you materials if there aren't any, if you're trying to cater with fish and there's no fish in the sea, if you need paper and there's no trees anymore. So it's absolutely fundamental. And as I've stressed, we need a self-regulating, healthy ecosystem which can provide all of those services that we talked about. So the provisioning, the stability, the beauty, and all that functioning, that recycling, and so on. But let's not forget that the climate crisis is intimately linked to the biodiversity crisis. So the two really go hand in hand, and you can't really think of one without the other. And supporting biodiversity does in turn help with the climate crisis. And as I said at the beginning, your brand reputation, it will really be helped by supporting some of this. Your customers will love it. Your recruitment will be helped, and investors, if you're looking for them, will value that you're helping biodiversity too. So looking at your employees, if you have them, your colleagues, mental health and well-being, connecting with nature, whether it is simply having pot plants in your working space, or whether it's taking them all out for a day, planting trees, or working in nature, has huge benefits for people's health, mental health and well-being. So these are all things you want in your team. You don't want them stressed. You want them to have good focus, creativity, and of course you want your employees to be satisfied and stay with you for longer. And all of these taken together will enhance productivity in your business. So that's a whole list of side benefits really from connecting your employees with nature. I'll just quickly show you this. I've done quite a bit of research in how nature is good for people, and this is an experiment where this is a conducted experiment. This isn't just observation. So people were given a really hard mental task, like taking 7 off 1001 serially or something like that. And then when they'd done that, they had a rest period for 40 minutes. They could go out in nature, they could wander around the industrial area where this took place, or they could sit and read or listen to music. And those who had gone out for 40 minutes in nature, when they were examined again by psychologists, they were so much better. They performed better. They were less angry, less tired, less stressed. So that's just I've got loads of these, but that's one little experiment to remind us that we are creatures of nature. We need nature, and it helps our mental health and our stress reduction. Just another little one here. I won't ask you, but does anyone know, think in your heads of what connects ferns, seashell, a spiral seashell, and a snowflake? And they all have fractal patterns in them. So fractals are ever repeating motifs that get smaller and smaller. So if you took a magnifying glass to a snowflake, you'd see this same motif repeated over and over again. And similarly, the fern has a big leaf-shaped thing made of smaller leaf-shaped things, and so on. And gazing at fractals, actually, it changes our brain waves and induces a relaxed but focused state. And it's a state of readiness to act. It's a state of creativity, and it's how we would want to be when we were working. So that's another benefit of having plants and natural scenery around us. I think I've said this really, that another benefit for you is that your employees are more likely to stay with you if you align with their values, and we hope the upcoming workforce of today do have values where they want to look after the planet. And you'll be providing a healthy, inspiring work environment if you take on some of these actions. And of course, opportunities for team building through getting them out in nature. Once you take this on board and you have it as an intrinsic part of what you're doing with your business, there's all sorts of networks you can join. With Make It Wild, we are members of the Rainforest Trust Conservation Circle, which allows us to network with some other organisations. There's a group of businesses without blood sports. Just depends what your particular angle will be, but there's lots of green business networks that you can join. The certifications, B Corp is a well-known one, which examines many aspects of your business. Possibly a better fit for small businesses is the Organisation for Responsible Businesses, but there's lots of certifications that you can apply for once this is intrinsic to your business. And awards for sustainability, just to mention here, Make It Wild won one last week, which John collected for us. But just an example here of a company that we work with, Home Instead, is a company that deliver care in the home, and they've been working with Make It Wild to offset their carbon footprint and bring biodiversity into their operations, and they just won an award for sustainability and biodiversity. So, a nature-connected workplace, it fosters innovation and it improves the company's public image. By integrating biodiversity, you will attract the top talent and you'll improve the morale of your team. And really, it isn't just an environmental issue. It is an environmental issue, but it's a business resilience issue too, which hopefully I've illustrated. And it will give your business a competitive advantage. So if there's any questions about the benefits, I think I'll just zoom on and just quickly take you through a couple of case studies, if that's okay. So Team 17, British video game developer. If you're old enough, you might know about their most famous game, which was Worms in, I think it was 91. And they're now part of a bigger group. They've got about 300 employees based in Wakefield, or they are based, the company's based in Wakefield. The employees are all over the place. And they reached out to us. Oh no, first of all, they do all kinds of things actually for sustainability and for nature, for biodiversity. They have a green month and volunteer. They'd go litter picking, they do beach cleans. They've started really examining their supply chain for support of biodiversity. And they've started planting 10 trees for each year of their business with us at Make It Wild, and they're going to have a Team 17 forest ultimately. But they actually got much sort of closer to nature really, which started in 23. Their ESG manager arranged a private tour of our main site to talk about rewilding, biodiversity, and to try and get a feel for what we do and why this was important. Last year they had a team day. We gave them a talk about rewilding and a guided tour of our site here, and they did some tree planting. And it was such a success that they did it again just last month. This time they asked, because it was the anniversary of this game, Worms, it was its 30th anniversary, I think. So we talked about worms in biodiversity and they had a little talk about the history of the Worms game. We had a guided tour and they planted some more trees. And it's had huge benefits really for their business, and they're going to continue working with us. So their team, feels connected to nature. They've all learned a lot, and it's been a direct thing. They've come and experienced it. It's not just been reading or watching a film. They've made a financial contribution, which, as I've said, is impressive to customers, to investors, and to their own team and potential talent. The team have all felt increased well-being through coming and spending time with nature with us, and they've made a demonstrable contribution to biodiversity and to their local communities through their beach cleaning and so on. Finally, a company you might more likely to have heard of, which is Finisterre. It's a smaller company based in Cornwall. We don't actually work with them at all, but I think they illustrate a really good point about biodiversity. They've been a B Corp for quite some time. They must have been really quite early uptakers of that. Quite famously founded by surfers for surfers, and they've got this really surfing sort of vibe throughout all of their branding and their products, and they're really all about the sea. But it's a small ethical clothing brand, not massive at all, just 70 employees. All of their packaging is paper or fully biodegradable at home. So, and I think that's amazing. They're the ones I was talking about when I mentioned that. I think that's really brilliant. Their factories have been, because their products are all made all over the world, but they've visited and inspected and done due diligence on all of their factories for sustainability. So there's no factory that's polluting or doing anything bad for the planet, or employing slave labor or anything like that. They've done really good due diligence on their supply chain, and their fabrics are all chosen with an eye to the planet and sustainability and biodiversity too. Some are made from recycled ocean plastics. That's an amazing thing. I'm in touch with a couple of businesses who gather ocean plastic and make it into other things, which I think is brilliant. Well, we have plastic in the ocean, let's get it out and do something better with it. They use organic cotton, and that ties back to my point about not using pesticides. So if we're growing something on a big scale like cotton, that's really important that it's organic. It's better for us too, because some of these forever chemicals that are in chemically treated fabrics, there's now evidence that they can be absorbed through the skin, which is a bit worrying. And they use wool from regenerative farms in the UK, so farms which are trying very hard to support nature. And they also have, which this is brilliant, they have a thing called the C7 programme. And their sort of motto for that is the ocean needs us to act now. And they offer free resources for children and young people mostly to teach about ocean activism, as they call it. So that's campaigning and being an activist for the ocean. So there's two businesses really who are supporting biodiversity in different ways. So what are you going to do now? Lots of these things are really cheap or free, and they're easy wins. So the first thing to do is look at your business and see where there are opportunities to support nature and to support biodiversity. So whether it's your supply chain, whether it's what you do with your waste, whether it's engaging your team with a conservation activity, and try and implement at least one biodiversity positive change this year, preferably more. Of course, more would be better, but if all you can manage is one, then it's a start, and have a plan for introducing more. Oh yeah, I just mentioned that. Engage your employees in nature-based initiatives, whatever that might be. Maybe take a little bit of a poll what they'd prefer to do, but measure and share your impact, because only by talking about this do we spread the word and have that ripple effect of getting other businesses to support nature too. And that's all I was going to say. So if anyone has any comments or questions, I'm going to be here for a bit longer.
I'll stop the recording now, Helen, and then
Okay.
maybe we